Hey, I'm Jeremy. Welcome back to Rugby Informer. Today I thought we'd take a little look at the Rugby Championship and what we can kind of expect from each of the teams. So first and foremost, I thought we'd look at the Wallabies since they're taking on the Springboks and there's a point of interest around that match. So I think we're finally going to really get to see the first real test for Joe Schmidt after he's taken over the Wallabies following his stint with Ireland for so many years. I think the Wallabies are really in a building phase at the moment following that suicide mission that Eddie Jones sent them on during the 2023 World Cup. He stacked the team full of inexperienced youngsters, pulled out all the more experienced stalwarts that should have been there, and they didn't perform. And I think he knew that and admitted to that even after the World Cup. So Joe Schmidt's really picking up where Eddie Jones left off and starting a new rebuilding phase that should have been in the works years ago. But either way, their test season got off to a pretty good start. I mean, they beat Wales twice at home. To be fair, that wasn't a very powerful Welsh side. They had a pretty awful Six Nations. They lost to every single team, including Italy. But the Welsh also love to put up a fight, so not a bad start for the Wallabies to get 2 wins over them and showcase a few of their new younger players that I think will start fitting into that Wallaby style of play a lot better. And under the guidance of Joe Schmidt, he has a knack for really bringing the best out of young players. He did so with Ireland with a lot of the young guys that are now pretty much starters for the whole squad. And on top of that, Joe Schmidt's brought in a lot of the standout players who performed well in the Super Rugby Pacific competition, which is really good to see those players getting rewarded rather than just relying on the guys that have been there since the World Cup. Particularly in the back row department, as well as the outside backs. There's a lot of players who are great attackers, athletic, speedy, as well as powerful and strong ball carriers, which is what Australia's been lacking a little bit over the years. So we'll do a deep dive into the teams as they're announced. But in terms of an overall squad and a kind of ethos around the squad and a coaching department, I think the Wallabies are going to be on the up. Now, I don't think they might be as well drilled as they need to be to take on the All Blacks and South Africa and even Argentina at the moment. But I think you might see a little bit of a surprise from them this Rugby Championship. Looking ahead to the Springboks, I think they're going to be on a little bit of a redemption tour following that lackluster second test against the Irish that ended up drawing the test series, which, while amazing, I think will go down as a little bit of a disappointment for Rassie Erasmus and his coaching staff, as well as all the players. And Erasmus has gone with a pretty recognizable squad for this Rugby Championship. Guys who've been there, done that, played at World Cups. They make up the bulk of the players. There are some new guys who are definitely going to get an opportunity, given that there's been some injuries, retirements, and other things that have kept players out of the squad. I think we'll also see the real results of the new coaching staff members, such as Tony Brown, who's kind of heading up the backline attack of the Springboks. And we saw a little bit of his influence during the Portugal game, as well as in the Irish tests. The Boks were playing a lot wider, looking for a lot more offloads and running some set moves, which was quite nice to see. And of course, Jerry Flannery has come in as the defense coach, the old Irish hard man. So I think you'll see a lot more structured and settled Bok team in this Rugby Championship, playing against foes that they're way more familiar with rather than an Irish side or a French side that kind of plays a little bit unorthodox rugby. And I think you'll see them clicking together, the combinations working a bit better, and hopefully a little bit of an evolution and a continuation of that more ambitious rugby that we saw in the Irish tests. I think the Springboks are the most settled and ready team for this competition, I would say, out of the 4. They've proven that they really like being a tournament team that plays tough games week on week, getting better and better and kind of galvanizing themselves through it, rather than being disjointed from too many week breaks or things like that. So I think the Boks will be in prime position to kind of take control of this Rugby Championship, especially given that we're taking on the Wallabies first. And with all due respect to them, I think they're going to be a proper challenge. But I think it's a great opportunity for the Boks to get a win, possibly 2 over them away from home before taking on the All Blacks back in South Africa. Looking at New Zealand, the All Blacks are a bit of a strange one at the moment. They had a little bit of a underwhelming World Cup despite getting all the way to the final. I think they would have thought that they could have probably gone all the way. And there's been a lot of changes of personnel, a lot of interesting updates with regards to some of their key players, the likes of Ardie Savio, signing for Moana Pacifica in the Super Rugby Pacific competition, and they've had a new captain also with Scott Barrett, who from the most recent I see, he won't be even playing the first game. So there's a lot of changes with the All Blacks. A lot of the whole team is kind of shuffled around. We saw that in their 2-match test against England. You know, Damien McKenzie kind of took on the reins at fly half. There was a whole different back line, a lot of new players making their debuts even. So you've got a pretty different All Blacks team. You know, guys have been around the block and been there, but a different combination and different orientation, should we say, of the team that lines up. You know, and with Scott Robinson coming in, I think he gets his proper first Rugby Championship campaign with the All Blacks under his belt. So I think the players want to perform above the level that they are. You know, just looking at some of the comments some of the players made after the English series, they seemed very disappointed. You know, even Sam Whitelock's autobiography came out and he was talking about the All Black era under Ian Foster and how they felt that they weren't coached to the level that some of those players are used to. And I think what he means by that is a lot of them playing for the Crusaders under Scott Robinson over the last couple of years. I think that's the kind of coaching style and intensity that they're used to, whether it's less or more. So bringing that into the All Black environment with the extra players they've got, should I say, you're going to get a really great mix. You know, if Scott Robinson was able to perform at that level and get that many trophies in that cabinet with a smaller pool of players and now having access to the wider New Zealand squad, you know, I think you're going to see the All Blacks go from strength to strength, despite a lot of people thinking that they're going through a bad patch. I think you're about to see the All Blacks reach maybe a potential that they haven't reached in a little while. I'm excited to see them. I think that matchup between the Springboks and the All Blacks is one that everyone is waiting for. So can't wait to see more of them. And I think you're going to see a lot of interesting tricks from the Kiwis this competition. And finally, Argentina. You know, they're pretty much an enigma at this point in time. Most South Africans don't get to see many of the Argentinian players playing unless you're watching top 14 rugby or following Argentinian club rugby, but they've got a really nice squad for the upcoming games against the All Blacks, as well as generally for the Rugby Championship. You know, they're coached by Felipe Contempomi, a guy who's been there, done that, one of the most experienced Argentinian fly halves of all time. So they've got a coach who's got the players' respect. He's a guy who understands Test rugby. He's a guy who understands playing Argentinian flair rugby. So I think you're going to see a very good mix of playing styles from the Argentinians to adapt to whoever they are taking on. And we've seen that over the years. You know, when they wanted to play a more tight, close, physical game against the Boks, they can sometimes match them physically. When they need to play a fast, quicker game to try and outplay or outrun the All Blacks or the Wallabies, they've had the ability and the players to do that. And you know, Argentina have beaten the Springboks, the All Blacks, and the Wallabies over the last couple of years here and there. So I think they really want to stake their claim this year and make sure that people know that they deserve to be there. Looking at their most recent results, they played 2 games against France in Argentina. The first one they lost quite narrowly. The second one they beat France quite narrowly. But this was a French side that was a little bit diluted from their key players. Not a bad team by any means because the French depth is so good at the moment, but this was a weaker French side, and the Argentinians showed that they can go head-to-head with them, and ended up being a bit of an arm wrestle between them. And then Argentina went on and played a game against Uruguay, which was just one-way traffic, and Argentina put 70-odd points on them. So they haven't had the best preparation for rugby championships. Their quality of opposition has been a little bit up and down, whereas you know, South Africa's had Ireland, the All Blacks have had England, and the Wallabies had Wales. So I think Argentina are probably the least prepared, but most unpredictable team heading into the tournament. And just from a South African perspective, I think it's going to be quite interesting for us to see all these other teams coming together. You know, after the dissolving of Super Rugby as we knew it, and Super Rugby Pacific took off, and the Argentinian sides have to play their own internal domestic league or head back to France, we haven't really seen a lot of these new players, especially the Australians and the New Zealanders playing in the Super Rugby Pacific competition, as well as the Argentinians, who are really a kind of a unquantifiable element at this point in time. You know, there's a lot of the key players that float around in Europe and play in various English clubs, but pretty much they are looking like the the wildcard team of the competition, which is maybe a kind of role that they thrive off. So I think having a look at these squads and this whole competition is going to be a really interesting one, seeing how these teams perform after being away from one another for so long. But in the meantime, let us know what you think. Comment down below, give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe, hit like, all that jazz, and I'll see you in the next one.